podcast is right for you. Talking MMA and UFC. No Casuals is the place to be. Whether it's Aiden, Luke, or Teddy too, the No Casuals podcast is right for you.
Hey guys, welcome back to No Casuals. I'm Aiden, as always. We're taking a little bit of a break, but if you remember me and my wonderful co-host,
Luke.
then you should be in good shape because we are talking about a phenomenal fight card this weekend. UFC 319, Chicago United Center. It's going to be a phenomenal card. So many great fights to talk about. But first, let's start with our prospect of the night. Now, look, I think it's a pretty simple pick. Okay, look, all right. I'm a little bit in a bind here because my prospect is 38 years old, but he is actually the younger fighter in his fight on Saturday night when he fights Jared Cannonier.
Yeah.
Unranked at middleweight, Michael Venom Pages. He's ranked at welterweight, so I'm going to count it because he's technically an unranked prospect. And look, he's 2-1 in the UFC. He's only lost to Machado Gary, who's looked phenomenal outside of that fight. And it's one of Gary's worst performances in the UFC. He's got a win over Kevin Holland, which, whatever. But the Shara win is great. I expect him to beat Cannonier handily, become ranked, and make a title push very, very soon. And I think the matchups at the top of the division for MVP are very fun. Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland. Really, really fun, great kickboxers that MVP can square up very well against. So I'm excited for him. He is my prospect of the night. And I think he beats Jared Cannonier on Saturday night. What do you think, Luke?
No, I agree.
Thanks, Luke. All right, Luke, you got your process of the night. You went a little more traditional with your pick. Tell me about your fighter and why you chose them.
Yeah, I mean, I chose a little bit of a younger fighter. He's 25. Nothing against MVP though. I think he'll get it done. But Chase Hooper is finally getting like a younger opponent. We've seen him fight veterans. And he's fighting Hernandez. I'll give him credit where it's due. He's an okay kickboxer. But compared to Hooper on the ground, I don't think it's even close. I think Chase Hooper is probably one of the best unranked lightweight grapplers. He's incredibly high BJJ. He's 25, probably the youngest on the card, and he definitely looks like it's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, not a Khamzat Chimaev type wolf, but still enough to win the fight, as long as he didn't goon too much this camp. It's a small increase in challenge for him, but I don't think Hernandez has the level of grappling where I would question Hooper's ability to submit him early, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
And look, I thought Hooper after he lost to Steve Garcia he sort of had a ceiling. His striking could only get so good, and his grappling he'd always be kind of a one-trick pony. So when he was beating guys like Jordan Levitt and Clay Guida, I was like, whatever. And then he showed great striking against Vladislav Borshev, great striking against Jim Miller. He showed great striking in his last fight at UFC 314. I don't remember who he fought last time. Um, whoever he fought, he beat predominantly with the striking, if I remember correctly. So he's
Yes.
shown that he's really a true mixed martial artist in a way that he was not for a very long time in the early days of his UFC career. So I'm really excited to see where he goes. I think this is a great pick for Proxy. I think it's the more clear pick. It's a traditional pick, and I think it's a good pick. I think there's a reason why that is. So I'm with you, Luke. I think Chase Hooper gets it done against Hernandez too, through both his striking and his grappling. Now we're going to our next segment of the day. Before we get really into the meat and potatoes of UFC 319, we're going to talk to our friend Ted, who we haven't seen in a long time on this show, and we're glad to have back. This is Ted's Talks, the signature segment where we call in our special advice from Teddy, who'll give us his hot take on UFC 319 this Saturday.
Hey guys, welcome back to TED Talks. We're here to talk about UFC 319, the main event, Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev. I'm really excited for this fight, and I have been for a while because I think that it really is a test for Dricus, especially Khamzat has ran through the majority of his opponents, so it's going to be great to see kind of a challenge for Dricus. I see this fight playing out in a way that's different from a lot of Khamzat's recent fights. He submitted Robert Whitaker and made it look easy in a couple of minutes. How I think this fight is going to end out is I think these guys are going to battle for 5 rounds. I think that Dricus is going to be able to fend off most of Hamzat's submissions, but he's not gonna be able to manage the takedowns. And I think Khamzat will just dominate on the ground and get a decision victory. I'm thinking a split, unanimous decision. So it's gonna be a war. It's gonna be fun, but Dricus is just not gonna be able to. He's gonna succumb to the pressure of Khamzat and his amazing wrestling. So that's how I see it playing out. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. I'm Ted. This has been Ted Talks. That's my take.
The wink always gets me.
The way he's
Um, it seems like he just woke up when he's recording that.
right? It seems like he just woke up. That
He
makes
looked a little tired.
that makes two of us. Okay, so that takes us perfectly into our next fight, DDP versus Khamzat Chimaev. And this is a fight that can go a million different directions. I want to get your thoughts first, Luke, before I give my pick on this fight. I've done a lot of thinking. I've got a very well formulated pick, but I want to hear yours first, Luke.
Yeah, I don't dislike Teddy's the conclusion he came to at the end. I wrote down a couple questions. I was like, let's see a lot of people talking about like this is as close to a 50-50 fight the UFC has made in a long time. Khamzat Chimaev, probably the most dangerous grappler in the UFC. Is that a statement we can make? And I think the biggest question is how will DDP react to that first takedown attempt in what I would assume to be the first 20, maybe 30 seconds. The last time DDP fought a remotely high level wrestler, because you have to remember he's fought Strickland twice and Adesanya, predominantly strikers, was Derek Brunson. And in that first round, he got completely out wrestled and dominated. So that he cannot afford to do against Khamzat. He literally just snapped the jaw of Whitaker. So it makes me worried. Yes, I know DDP has good-ish wrestling, or he makes it work. I feel like that's a good statement for DDP is he makes it work because he'll wind up on top, but you might not notice how he gets there. And ultimately, I'm going with Khamzat by submission.
Luke, I completely agree, actually. I think DDP has had a great run. He's one of the greatest middleweights of all time, and he's been super entertaining, and he's very good, and he gets better every single time. He's gotten significantly better every single time he's fought. Look at the first fight against Strickland, who's not a great fighter, in my opinion, and the second fight against Strickland, it's a different level of fighter entirely across the board as a mixed martial artist. But Hamzat's wrestling is so good, and he's so fast and so big and strong even at middleweight, where he's up a weight class, that it shouldn't even matter what DDP has been doing for the last 6 months of training and improving and evolving. I don't think it matters. Hamza
Yeah.
is too much of a physical and athletic specimen at this weight class where the skill level is severely diminished, to be honest. And I mean, we look at what DDP did to Whitaker, right? He had some moments and it was close, and then he pulled through and got the big finish and the big upset against a better Whitaker than the one we have today, but not significantly so. And then look what Khamzat did. Khamzat took him down and broke his face in 2 minutes. It's just a different level, and I think Khamzat will get the and nuance Saturday night. I think it'll be a first or second round submission before Khamzat even has the opportunity to gas out like DDP needs him to in order to win this fight.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the rest of the card on Under the Radar. Here's some fights that Luke and I have underlined that we really would like to call your attention to before this Saturday's big fight card. First, our co-main event, Lerone Murphy, the number 11 ranked UFC featherweight according to Tapology, against the unranked and debuting Aaron Pico out of Bellator. Now, interestingly, despite the fact that this is Pico's debut, he had a very credentialed career in Bellator and is the favorite against the undefeated and top prospect in Lerone Murphy, a guy who's probably 2 fights away from the UFC title.
Yeah. I
So
think it's interesting. These odds are first time I'm seeing these odds. I think they're a little bit different on verdict. But it's interesting. I mean, Aaron Pico is one of those guys that we've wanted in the UFC for a long time, and now he's here, and he has a boatload of hype, and it's kind of seems like it's rightfully so. He's not one of these guys like Pitbull and Patchy Mix who kind of had their careers and now they're switching over to UFC. He seems like his momentum is only beginning. Those odds are interesting though, because Lerone Murphy's, I mean, we've seen his last fight how he evaded all the shots from Josh Emmett and how he has the cardio to go a full 5 rounds, even though it's a 3 round fight. Aaron Pico kind of reminds me of Ilya in the sense that he was predominantly a wrestler and now he's going for these one punch knockout and discovering the power that he has. And it makes me a little bit nervous because Lerone Murphy, almost got slept by Dan Ige. But in his last fight, it looked like he learned from that. I mean, Josh Emmett didn't even have the chance really to throw, and he ultimately gassed out. But I'm going with Aaron Pico. I agree. I think this fight is very close.
I disagree. I completely disagree. And I don't think this fight's close at all, actually. And I would bet the house on Lerone Murphy. And I'll tell you why.
Oh, wow,
Lerone Mur-
strong.
Lerone Murphy is a very good mixed martial artist. He has wrestled the best strikers and struck with the best grapplers. You know what I mean? He's a very jack of all trades, master of none type of fighter. Not the most entertaining, not the guy everyone's buzzing about, not this undefeated featherweight that everyone seems to think that Ilya was at the division, right? With all this hype and all this momentum. He doesn't have that. 'Cause he's not that exciting. He has one really, really good knockout in the UFC against Makwan Amirkhani 4 years ago, and since then it's been snooze fest, truthfully. But he's got wins over Danny Gay. He's got a win over Edson Barbosa, and he's got a win over Josh Emmett. Those are his best wins. Aaron Pico has a win over nobody. He has no good wins because Aaron Pico is not this patchy mix or belt or a pit bull guy. You're right in that he's a much younger guy. He's got a lot more hype. He can reach the ceiling and he can get to the point of beating Lauren Murphy, but I don't think he's there yet. And if you look at the guys Patchy Mix was fighting, if you look at the guys Pitbull was fighting, these guys are names. These are guys like Michael Chandler. These are guys that are known in the Bellator sphere. AJ McKee is a name that Pitbull fought as well. Aaron Pico wasn't fighting these guys. Aaron Pico wasn't fighting the good Bellator guys. He was fighting the worst Bellator guys. And the durability of a Lerone Murphy, a guy who's been in trouble and recovered against some of the hardest hitters in the history of 145, like Edson Barbosa and Danny Gay, I don't see it where Pico can land the one shot and knock Lerone Murphy out. I don't see him having that level of power when it translates into the durability that we'll see in the UFC where the chins get better, the recoveries are better because they're in better shape. They're better athletes. They're not guys that work at gas stations like the guys Aaron Pico is fighting in Bellator. They're actual professional athletes. And that is the difference that we'll see on Saturday night. And that is why I'm so strong on Lerone Murphy, despite the fact that I'm a believer in Aaron Pico and his potential. Lerone Murphy is simply one of the most underrated guys in the weight class. He's a guy no one's talking about, and he's a guy that should be on the verge of a title shot after a win on Saturday.
Interesting. All right.
That's
Disagree.
that's one of my bold takes, but I have a couple more in the chamber.
All
Next,
right.
Jeff Neal versus CP Carlos the Nightmare Prates. This is a great fight. I mean, this is a fight we were
This is
calling for
great.
a long time.
Yep.
A fight that was booked and then unbooked and then rebooked. And it's one of the best boxers in the UFC in Jeff Neal against one of the best kickboxers in the UFC in Carlos Prates, head to head, lots of power on both sides. Who do you got in this one? How do you got it?
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, I think this is going to be a phenomenal fight. Their styles are it was perfect. I wanted to see it happen at 314, but I'm excited to see it happen at 319. Prate's last fight makes me nervous, right? He fumbled a finish that looked like it was in his grasp when against Ian Gary. I mean, it was so close. And that made me kind of knock his fight IQ. It makes me nervous for this fight. Neil is a great boxer, and their styles are obviously going to make for a great fight. But I ultimately think this is an easier fight for Carlos Prates. Neil has been outstruck by Neil Magny. He was outstruck by Shavkat. Even I would say by Ian Gary, and Prates has more power than all of them, probably is more technical than all of them, and maybe not more technical than Shavkat, but I think he's gonna knock him out, and I think it'll probably be in first couple rounds because I think both these guys will lean into the fight and really bite down and make it fight of the night.
Look, I completely agree. I think this is going to be the fight of the night on Saturday. I think this is also a fight that Carlos Prates is going to win. I think that the difference between a guy like Ian Gary, who routed Jeff Neal using his technicality, his kickboxing range, is the power. That's the only difference. Is that the technicality and the speed that Gary has, Prates has too. Prates is nearly as good of a kickboxer as Ian Gary as we saw when they fought. Ian Gary's a slight level ahead, but it's very comparable. And I think in a rematch, a lot of people would favor Prates to win. So we have a guy in Carlos Prates who's facing a guy who lost decisively to Ian Gary. He's coming off a win over RDA, which means nothing, and it's an injury win in the first 30 seconds, which means it
Yeah,
means extra nothing, right?
yeah,
Whereas Prates has beaten everybody, with the exception of Ian Gary, which no shame in that. I think Prates is a better striker than Neo Magny. I think he's a better striker than Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he is an only worse striker than Ian Gary, and just by this much. And with power and stylistically, I think Prates finds a shot, puts Jeff Neal on his rear, and knocks him out.
yeah. Agree.
All right, we've got a couple more fights to talk about. Next, let's talk about Tim Elliott versus Kai Asakura opening the main card. Of course, Asakura is in his second UFC fight. Elliott is in his 20th or something. Big
Hmm.
difference in terms of the experience level. However, similar in age, similar in records. What do you think? Luke.
Yeah, I mean these once again the odds. I think Kai Sakura is a huge favorite. He shouldn't be a moderate favorite. He should be a huge favorite. The UFC is handling Tim Elliott to Kai Sakura basically on a plate. This guy went from fighting Pantoja, one of the most active flyweight champions, to a guy who's 38 and hasn't fought in 2 years. And 38 for flyweight is it's old. I think the difference here will be night and day, and he's going to knock out Tim Elliott. Another knockout, I think, will happen. I think there's going to be a couple knockouts on this card, more than a couple. Asakura doesn't have the best grappling, but he had great moments in that fight with Pantoja. I mean, we all remember that flying knee that somehow he ate, but I don't think any other flyweight could eat that knee. I don't think he's going to struggle with Tim Elliott, and like I said, I think he's going to knock him out.
Yeah, look, I think I've been thinking about this fight a lot because initially I was like Tim Elliott will win. I don't think Asakura is very good, and I don't think Asakura is very good. I don't think he's ever going to win a title in the UFC. I don't think he's ever going to be top five ranked in the UFC. I don't think he's particularly good. I think he'd be better at bantamweight than flyweight, to be completely honest. He's too big for flyweight. I think he has issues making the weight, whatever. But I think a lot about Pantoja and how good he is. And it's like Cara France did worse than Asakura against Pantoja. And I would easily favor Kai Kara France to beat Tim Elliott. So if we're using MMA math, which I know we should never use, but Asakura looks better against the guy than Kara France. Kara France would beat Elliott, so then Asakura should also beat Elliott.
Right.
But at the same time, I think Elliott he's tricky on the ground. He's crafty. He's savvy. He's one of these gritty guys that gets hurt at every fight and somehow comes back. But he's got wins over really good. He's got a win over Tagir Lembekov. He's got really good wins, and I think this is a close fight. I think the odds. I would put some money on Elliott if I was at home. I think it's a very close fight. However, I think that Asakura gets it done if the odds are even. I would say these odds I disagree with. I'd put it like maybe plus 170 Elliott, plus 150 Elliott, but I would still favor Asakura. So yeah, my official pick is Kai Asakura to win, and if he does win, I think it'll be by knockout.
Yeah.
All right, next up on Under the Radar, we have King Green versus Diego Ferreira. Now I'll lead with my pick on this one. I got Ferreira. Ferreira is a phenomenal fighter. He should be a massive favorite in my opinion, despite the fact that he's somewhat older. He seems to have entered a second prime with his wins over Michael Johnson, his wins over Mateusz Rebecki. Have been fun, like one of the best performances we've seen, the best performance we've seen against Rombetsky, beat him better than Chris Duncan did. And we've got a guy in King Green who, yes, at one point was ranked, and yes, at one point was a contender, but has fallen upon tough times. He's gone on a pretty bad streak right now of losses. Lost to Mauricio Hufi by a violent first round knockout last time. I don't see him recovering to the point of winning a fight against a guy as dangerous as Fajeda. I think personally this fight shouldn't be competitive at all. I think Fajeda is going to finish him in the first round, and I hope that King Green retires in the win or lose, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I completely agree that he should consider retirement and how much he's deteriorated since in the past like 2 years basically. Um, Similar to like I just been noticing there's a lot of older talent on this card. I mean, these guys are 38 and 40. We'll probably talk about Edson Barbosa too, and maybe a couple retirement fights that could happen. Green's chin is pretty weak. We saw that against Mauricio Rufy. And coming off that knockout, which could be knockout of the year, is rough. Diego's still dangerous. He has a knockout over Michael Johnson, which aged really well. And I just think he's had much more dominant performances as of late. And I'm picking him just like you will. I don't think this fight will be close at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then next we have Edson Barbosa, who's facing off against Drakkar Close. Now this is Edson's return to lightweight. Um, he was had a tremendous career there, and then moved to featherweight, had mixed success, and then he's moving back up in his older age at now nearly 40. Against another older guy in Drakkar Close, who's had a very up and down career, is one of the best unranked lightweights at the UFC, in my opinion. Who do you got in this one, Luke, and how do you got it?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably going to be Barbosa's last fight. I hope it's one of his last. If, I think he's way past his prime. He's been out for 2 years, so I don't really know what to expect. And he's versing Close, who's coming off a loss to Joel Alvarez, but he's still a scrappy stand-up fighter, and he still has the grappling elements in place. I For me, this is hard for me to pick. I just ultimately think that Barbosa has fought a much higher level of opponents. I mean, if you were to put their opponents side by side, it would be, I mean, insane. I mean, you have Barbosa who's fought Khabib, he's fought the absolute greats of his division. And because of that, even in his recent loss to Murphy, he didn't let him walk away with it. He looked okay. And considering Murphy's one of the best featherweights right now, even though it's a different division, it's still impressive. And his kickboxing is so elite that I ultimately think he'll get the win. I agree with the odds. I think it's very close, and this is a hard fight to really make a concrete decision on that I would lock in.
I completely agree. I'm still kind of in the air here, and it's what Barbosa we see. Because if we see
Yeah.
the return of a vintage-looking Barbosa, like we saw in Sadiq Youssef, for example, sort of this flash of the former greatness, Barbosa should win dominantly. He should not close out, to be honest.
Yep.
If this is the Barbosa we've seen more recently, the one that we saw against Lerone Murphy, for example, it's close. It's a close fight. The worst Edson Barbosa that we've seen is a close fight with the most recent version of Jakar Close, someone that got dominated by Joel Alvarez. That's a close fight. But if we think that Edson Barbosa has the capacity to improve, which I think he does, and get back to that form that he once had, to for one or two fights, right? Then yes, I see Edson Barbosa winning. I think the odds are perfect here. I think there's a lot of variables at play. I'm not sure quite who to pick either, but I would
Yep.
also lean towards Edson Barbosa here.
Yep.
And then our last fight that we will be talking about on Under the Radar, Bryan Battle and Nursultan Boyev are fighting in a very close fight. Once again, these are two of the younger prospects on the card at 30 and 31. Luke, who do you got in this one?
Yeah, I actually don't think this is a close fight. Bryan Battle, he's not particularly technical. He's actually really sloppy. He tries to get into these scrappy dog fights, but the bottom line is he's just messy. I mean, he lost. I don't care what people say. He lost to Randy Brown after missing weight. And he looked awful. The scorecard, I don't care about the scorecards. He lost the fight. And he has, a good chin, but he gets caught by technical strikers, and that is what Ruziboev is. He's tall, he's rangy. He lands these strikes that I think, and he has power, right? He has some good knockouts. He lands strikes that I think could rock Bryan Battle. I think that this will be another knockout. I think this card's going to be filled with knockouts. And I, I could see it. I guess I could see it going to a decision, kind of like Randy Brown, but I'm a lean knockout. And yeah, I'm not high on Bryan Battle at all. I was maybe before his Randy Brown fight, but I lost all my respect for him. And even with that aside, his performance looks so sloppy that I cannot choose him to win against Ruziboev, who's a very seasoned fighter.
Yeah, I completely disagree, actually. I think that the win quality of Bryan Battle against the win quality of Aniston Boyev is night and day. And that's why I'm picking Battle to win this fight. Probably via finish, I would say, likely a knockout. Because, because Bryan Battle, let's talk about Randy Brown. Let's talk about the Randy Brown fight. A fight I thought he also lost, a very close fight. Um, but one that I thought that Brown probably edged out, right? Randy Brown since then has gone on to knock out Nicholas Dalby, who's one of the best unranked middleweights on the planet, or welterweights on the planet, rather. We've got Battle moving up to a weight class where the skill level is significantly lower against the guy who got destroyed by Joaquin Buckley, who I would favor Battle against in all likelihood, to be honest. I think that Rosaboyev, he's over reliant on his size. He's a huge welterweight and even and a still a big middleweight. So for him to be using that and using that physicality makes sense, and he has a ton of power. But I don't think he's that good of a striker. I don't think he's that good of a wrestler. I think Battle is a better defensive wrestler than Rizboyev is an offensive wrestler. I think Battle's a better striker. I think he has similar power. I think he's got better kicking, better rangy strikes. I think in the clinch in the dog fight, I would favor Rizboyev, but I don't see that happening very much in this fight. I think Battle lands kicks, he slows him down in the first, starts to pick him apart in the second, finds a late finish. I think is what happens. Or he can land like he did earlier in his UFC career against a fighter who I forget the name of, land a huge head kick and put someone out cold in one shot, like we know Battle can. I think Battle has an absolute capacity to do that against Royce. I completely disagree with you, Luke.
Well, I hope we see that kind of action and not the cage holding that we saw against Randy Brown.
Well, I mean, look, it's Randy Brown. It's Randy Brown. And, like, look, he's not going to hold the cage against Rizboyev because Rizboyev is half the striker that Randy Brown is. He's more powerful than Randy Brown, but he's
I
not
don't think he can hold
physically.
Ruziboev. I think Ruziboev is too big.
I don't think he's going to hold Rizabov. I think he's going to strike with Rizabov. I think he's going to knock Rizabov out like he's knocked out most of his UFC opponents.
All right.
Right? What?
This will be a pick we'll talk about next week when I'm
Yeah.
right.
Okay. All right. When he's right. And by the way, we will be more frequent. We promise. There are 4 great weeks of fights coming up. We will be on here as much as we can be. Luke is starting college, so he'll be a little busy. We might miss 1 week because of that, but hopefully we won't.
Yeah,
I
we'll
will
still
be
make it
here.
work.
We'll make it work because we sometimes do. Anyway, this has been No Casuals. We hope you enjoyed our discourse. Very different picks this week, all over the board.
We were either in complete alignment or complete disagreement.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. Lots of interesting fights to watch and maybe put some money on or maybe not put some money on, depending on if you like having money and like listening to me. Any,
Uh,
I've been Aiden.
it's been Luke.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.